concert hall was slowly emptying out. People were still talking about the performance they had just witnessed. It was one of those nights where the music felt alive, where every note seemed to hang in the air just a little longer than usual. Robert Chen had just finished his final bow. At 62 years old, he had decided this would be his last tour. After 4 decades of traveling the world, playing in the most prestigious venues, he was ready to step back. His fingers weren't as quick as they used to be, and lately, he found himself thinking more about teaching than performing. The lobby of the concert hall was buzzing with energy. Robert stood near a small table, signing programs and greeting fans. Some wanted photos, others just wanted to shake his hand and tell him how much his music meant to them. He smiled and nodded, grateful but tired. These moments used to excite him, but now they felt routine. "Thank you so much for coming," he said to an elderly couple who had driven 3 hours to see him play. "That means the world to me." As they walked away, Robert stretched his shoulders and glanced toward the exit. That's when he noticed them. A woman and a young boy were making their way slowly through the crowd. The boy held a white cane in his right hand, tapping it gently on the marble floor. His left hand held his mother's arm. He wore dark glasses that covered his eyes completely. Robert watched as they walked past the grand piano that sat in the corner of the lobby. It was there mostly for decoration, though occasionally someone from the staff would play it during special events. The boy suddenly stopped. His head turned toward the piano and he stood completely still, as if he was listening to something no one else could hear. His mother tugged gently on his arm. "Come on, sweetheart. We need to catch the bus," but the boy didn't move right away. He kept his head tilted toward the piano, and Robert could see a small smile forming on his lips. There was something about that moment that caught Robert's attention. He had seen thousands of people around pianos in his lifetime, but this felt different. Without really thinking about it, Robert excused himself from the small group of fans waiting for autographs and walked over to them. "Excuse me," he said gently, not wanting to startle them. The woman turned around and her eyes went wide. "Oh my goodness, Mr. Chen, we just watched you perform. You were incredible." Robert smiled and looked down at the boy. "Thank you. And who is this young man?" "This is my son, Tommy," she said, placing her hand on the boy's shoulder. "We're huge fans of yours. Tommy has been asking to come to your concert for months." Robert knelt down slightly so he was closer to Tommy's height. "It's very nice to meet you, Tommy. Did you enjoy the concert?" Tommy's face lit up. "It was amazing. The way you played the second piece, the one in D minor, I could feel every single note. It was like the piano was singing." Robert raised his eyebrows. Not many 12-year-olds could identify keys by ear, especially not with such certainty. "You have a good ear, Tommy. Do you play piano yourself?" Tommy nodded enthusiastically. "I just started." "Well, not just started. I've been learning for about 6 months now at the community center near our house." "He loves it," his mother added. "He practices every single day on this little keyboard we have at home. His teacher says he's doing really well." Robert looked at the piano in the corner, then back at Tommy. An idea was forming in his mind. "Tommy, would you like to play something for me? This piano right here?" He saw the mother's face change. She looked worried. "Oh, that's very kind of you, Mr. Chen, but Tommy gets nervous playing in front of people. He's never really performed for anyone except his teacher." "I understand," Robert said softly. He turned back to Tommy. "What if I told you that you don't have to perform? What if you just played for fun? Just for yourself? I'll just happen to be standing nearby listening." Tommy bit his lip, thinking about it. Robert could see the wheels turning in his head. The boy was scared, but he also really wanted to do it. "Can I, Mom?" Tommy asked quietly. His mother hesitated, then smiled. "If you want to, sweetheart, but only if you want to." "Okay," Tommy said. "I'll try." A few people in the lobby had noticed what was happening. Robert Chen, one of the most famous pianists in the world, was leading a young blind boy to the piano. Some of them stopped to watch. A couple of people pulled out their phones. Tommy's mother helped guide him to the piano bench. She adjusted it slightly so his feet could touch the floor. Tommy placed his cane against the side of the piano and reached out with both hands, feeling the keys beneath his fingers. Robert stood a few feet away, watching carefully. He could see Tommy's hands shaking slightly. The boy was nervous, that much was clear. "Take your time, Tommy," Robert said in a calm voice. "There's no rush. No one here is judging you. Tommy took a deep breath. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment longer. Then he did something that made Robert smile. He laughed nervously and said, "My teacher always tells me to close my eyes and just feel the music. I guess I've got a head start on that part." Robert chuckled. "That's the best advice anyone can give. And you know what? You're right. You do have a head start." Tommy seemed to relax a little after that. His shoulders dropped and his hands stopped shaking quite so much. He placed his fingers on the keys again, found his starting position, and began to play. The lobby wasn't completely quiet. There were still people talking in the distance, footsteps echoing, doors opening and closing. But somehow when Tommy started playing, all of that seemed to fade away. He was playing a Mozart piece. Robert recognized it immediately. It was a sonatina, one that many beginners learned early on. It wasn't complicated by professional standards, but it required precision and feeling, and Tommy had both. Within the first few measures, Robert felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just a student playing notes on a page. This was different. Tommy's interpretation had depth. His timing was natural, not mechanical. The way he shaped each phrase showed an understanding of music that usually took years to develop. Robert found himself leaning forward slightly, listening more intently. The small crowd that had gathered was completely silent now. Even people who had been walking toward the exit had stopped to listen. Tommy's fingers moved across the keys with surprising confidence. Yes, there were a couple of small mistakes, tiny hesitations here and there, but they didn't matter. What mattered was the emotion behind the notes. What mattered was that this 12-year-old boy, who had only been playing for 6 months, was making a lobby full of strangers stop and listen. When Tommy played the final chord and lifted his hands from the keys, there was a brief moment of absolute silence. Robert stood there staring at the boy, his mind racing. Then the applause came. It started with one person, then another. Then suddenly everyone in the lobby was clapping. Some were even cheering. Tommy's face turned red. He smiled shyly and reached for his cane. His mother rushed over, her eyes glistening with tears, and hugged him tightly. Robert walked over slowly. He knelt down beside Tommy and spoke quietly, though his voice was filled with emotion. "Tommy, how long did you say you've been playing the piano?" 6 months, Tommy replied, still smiling from all the applause. 6 months, Robert repeated, more to himself than to Tommy. He looked up at Tommy's mother. "Has anyone ever told you that your son has an extraordinary gift?" She wiped her eyes and nodded. "His teacher mentioned that he learns quickly, but I thought she was just being encouraging." Robert shook his head slowly. "No, this is something else entirely." Robert couldn't stop thinking about what he had just heard. He stood there in the lobby, watching Tommy and his mother prepare to leave, and something inside him knew he couldn't just let them walk away. "Not yet. Wait," he called out, perhaps a bit too urgently. "Please, just wait a moment." Tommy's mother turned around, looking surprised. Robert took a breath and tried to compose himself. He was known for being calm and collected, but right now his mind was racing. "I'm sorry to keep you," Robert said, walking over to them. "But would you have a few minutes to talk? Maybe we could sit down somewhere? There's a small cafe just across the street that should still be open." The woman looked uncertain. She glanced at her watch, then at Tommy. "We really should catch the bus. It's the last one that goes to our neighborhood." "I'll pay for a taxi home," Robert said quickly. "Please, I know this seems strange, but what I just heard, I need to understand it better." Tommy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom, can we, please?" She looked at her son's excited face and sighed with a smile. "All right, but just for a little while." 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a quiet corner of a small coffee shop. The place was nearly empty except for a couple of university students studying in the back. Robert had ordered coffee for himself and hot chocolate for Tommy. "I hope you don't think this is weird," Robert began, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. I've been playing piano and teaching music for over 40 years. And what I heard back there, it's not something you see every day." Tommy's mother smiled softly. "I'm sorry I didn't properly introduce myself earlier. I'm Linda. And honestly, I'm still trying to process all of this. I never imagined Tommy would actually play in front of you." "Tell me about how Tommy started playing," Robert said, leaning forward with genuine interest. Linda took a sip of her coffee and began. "Well, Tommy lost his sight when he was 4 years old. It was a genetic condition that the doctors said was very rare. They told us it would happen eventually, but we didn't know it would be so soon. Tommy sat quietly, sipping his hot chocolate. He had heard this story many times before. The first few years were really hard, Linda continued, her voice becoming softer. Tommy struggled a lot. He was angry, sad, frustrated. He didn't want to learn Braille. He didn't want to use a cane. He just wanted things to go back to the way they were. Robert nodded, listening carefully. Then, about 8 months ago, a new music program started at our community center. It was free for kids in the neighborhood. I thought maybe it would be good for Tommy to try something new, something creative. At first he didn't want to go, but I convinced him to try just one class. And what happened? Robert asked. Tommy spoke up for the first time since they sat down. Mrs. Rodriguez was teaching the class. She's really nice. On the first day, she let everyone try different instruments. There were drums, guitars, even a violin, but when I sat down at the piano, it felt different. Different how? Robert asked gently. Tommy thought for a moment, trying to find the right words. It's hard to explain. When I touched the keys, it was like I could see something, not with my eyes, but in my head. The sounds made pictures. Does that make sense? Robert smiled. It makes perfect sense. More sense than you know. Linda continued the story. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, she noticed something right away. After just 2 lessons, she called me aside and told me Tommy had a natural ear for music. She said he could identify notes and remember melodies after hearing them just once or twice. Robert set down his coffee cup. Wait, how does Tommy learn the pieces he plays? Can he read Braille music? No, Linda shook her head. We looked into it, but the Braille music books are really expensive and the learning curve is steep. So Mrs. Rodriguez plays the pieces for him and he learns them by ear. Robert stared at them both. She plays them once and he memorizes them. Usually once, sometimes twice if it's more complicated, Tommy said casually, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. Tommy, Robert said slowly, the piece you played tonight, the Mozart Sonatina, how many times did you hear it before you could play it? Mrs. Rodriguez played it for me twice. That was about 3 weeks ago. I've been practicing it at home since then. Robert sat back in his chair, genuinely stunned. And you practice on a full piano? Linda laughed, but it was tinged with sadness. We wish. We have an old electric keyboard we bought at a thrift store for $30. Half the keys stick and it doesn't sound anything like a real piano. But it's what we can afford. Robert was quiet for a moment, processing everything he was hearing. He had taught hundreds of students over the years. He had seen talented children, dedicated children, children with wealthy parents who could afford the best instruments and the best teachers, but he had never seen anything quite like this. Let me ask you something else, Tommy, Robert said. When you play, what are you thinking about? Tommy tilted his head, considering the question. I don't really think. I just feel. Mrs. Rodriguez taught me that music isn't about playing the right notes in the right order. It's about telling a story. So when I play, I try to imagine what story the composer was trying to tell. And what story was Mozart telling in the piece you played tonight? Tommy smiled. I think he was remembering being young, like happy memories from childhood. That's why I tried to make it sound light and playful, but also a little bit sweet and sad, because when you remember good times, sometimes it makes you sad that they're gone. Robert felt a lump forming in his throat. This 12-year-old boy had just articulated something that many professional musicians spent decades trying to understand. Linda noticed Robert's expression. Mr. Chen, are you okay? Robert cleared his throat. Yes, I'm sorry. It's just... Linda, Tommy, I need to be very honest with you about something. What Tommy has is extremely rare. I don't mean just talent. I mean a fundamental connection to music that most people never develop, even with years of training. What are you saying? Linda asked, her brow furrowed. I'm saying that Tommy shouldn't be learning on a $30 keyboard at a community center. Not because there's anything wrong with that, but because he has the potential to do something truly extraordinary with music, and he needs proper training, proper instruments, proper opportunities. Linda's face fell. Mr. Chen, I appreciate what you're saying, but we can't afford private lessons or a real piano. I work 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. The community center program is wonderful, but it's all we have. I understand, Robert said quickly, and I'm not criticizing anything you've done. You've been an amazing mother. But what if there was a way to get Tommy more training without it costing you anything? What do you mean? Linda asked cautiously. Robert leaned forward, his eyes bright with excitement. There's a music institute not far from here. The New England Conservatory. They have programs for exceptionally talented young musicians. If Tommy could audition there, and if they see what I see, he could qualify for a full scholarship. Tommy's hand tightened around his hot chocolate cup. Really? I can't make any promises, Robert said honestly. But I know people there. I could arrange for Tommy to be assessed by some of the best teachers in the country. They would listen to him play, evaluate his abilities, and make a decision. Linda looked torn. I don't know. Tommy's never been in that kind of pressure situation before. What if he gets nervous? What if he doesn't play well? Then we'll know it wasn't the right time, Robert said gently. But Linda, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I'm telling you, what I heard tonight wasn't just good. It was extraordinary. Tommy deserves a chance to see how far his gift can take him. Tommy spoke up, his voice small but determined. I want to try, Mom. Linda looked at her son. She saw the hope in his face, the excitement, the possibility of something she had never dared to dream about. She thought about all the struggles they had faced, all the times she had worried about Tommy's future, wondered what kind of life he would be able to build for himself. Okay, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, we'll try. Robert smiled, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Good. I'll make some calls tomorrow. We'll set something up for a few weeks from now. That will give Tommy time to prepare. As they finished their drinks and prepared to leave, Robert called a taxi for them just as he had promised. Before they got in, Tommy turned toward where he knew Robert was standing. Mr. Chen, Tommy said, thank you. For listening to me play. For believing in me. Robert put his hand on Tommy's shoulder. Thank you, Tommy. For reminding me why I fell in love with music in the first place. As the taxi pulled away, Robert stood on the sidewalk watching the red taillights disappear into the night. Tomorrow he would make those phone calls. Tomorrow he would start pulling strings and calling in favors. But tonight he just stood there thinking about a blind boy who could see music in ways that most people never would. 3 weeks had passed since that night at the concert hall. For Tommy, those weeks felt like the longest of his life. Every day he practiced on his old keyboard, running through the pieces Mrs. Rodriguez had taught him, trying to make sure he remembered everything perfectly. Robert had called Linda twice during those weeks, checking in and giving her updates. He had spoken with the faculty at the New England Conservatory. He had vouched for Tommy personally, and finally he had secured an audition date. Today was that day. Linda held Tommy's hand as they walked through the main entrance of the conservatory. The building was impressive, with high ceilings and marble floors that made every sound echo. Tommy could hear footsteps from what seemed like miles away, voices bouncing off walls, the faint sound of someone practicing scales in a distant room. It's big, isn't it? Tommy whispered. Very big, Linda replied, trying to keep her own nervousness out of her voice. But don't worry, Mr. Chen said he'll meet us here. As if on cue, they heard Robert's familiar voice. Linda, Tommy, right on time. Tommy felt Robert's hand on his shoulder, warm and reassuring. How are you feeling, Tommy? Nervous, Tommy admitted. Really nervous. That's completely normal, Robert said. I still get nervous before I perform, and I've been doing this my whole life. But remember what we talked about. You're not here to prove anything to anyone. You're just here to play. They walked down a long hallway, their footsteps echoing. Tommy counted the turns in his head, trying to build a mental map of where they were going. It was something he always did in new places. So here's what's going to happen, Robert explained as they walked. There will be a panel of 4 teachers in the room. They're going to ask you to play a few pieces. They might ask you some questions about music. Just be yourself and answer honestly. What if I mess up? Tommy asked quietly. Robert stopped walking. Tommy could tell because the sound of their footsteps changed. Tommy, listen to me. Everyone messes up sometimes. Every single pianist in the world has hit wrong notes. What matters is how you recover, and more importantly, how you connect with the music. These teachers aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for potential. They reached a large wooden door. Robert knocked twice, and a voice from inside called out, "Come in." The room was smaller than Tommy expected. He could tell by the way sounds moved in the space. Robert guided him to a piano bench and helped him get situated. Tommy reached out and felt the piano. It was beautiful, much nicer than anything he had ever touched before. The keys were smooth and perfectly balanced, Good morning, Tommy, a woman's voice said. It was kind but formal. My name is Dr. Patricia Wells. I'm the head of the piano department here. With me are 3 of my colleagues. We're very excited to hear you play today. Tommy nodded, not trusting his voice. We understand from Mr. Chen that you learn music by ear. Is that correct? Another voice asked, this one belonging to a man with a slight accent. Yes, sir, Tommy managed to say. Fascinating, the man replied. Well, we'd like to start with something you already know. Would you play something you're comfortable with? Tommy took a deep breath. His hands were shaking again, just like they had in the concert hall lobby. But this felt different. There he had been playing for fun. Here people were judging him. Important people. People who would decide if he was good enough. He placed his fingers on the keys and started to play the same Mozart piece from before. But something was wrong. He was thinking too much. His fingers felt stiff. He hit a wrong note in the 3rd measure, then another in the 5th. He could feel himself panicking. Stop, he said suddenly, pulling his hands away from the piano. I'm sorry. Can I start again? There was a pause. Tommy felt his face burning with embarrassment. He had messed up. Already. In the first 30 seconds, then he heard Robert's voice, calm and steady. Tommy, what did I tell you in the lobby that night? Tommy thought back. You said to play just for fun. That's right. So stop thinking about us sitting here. Stop thinking about this being an audition. Just play for yourself. Tommy sat there for a moment, his heart pounding. Then he did something that surprised everyone in the room. He smiled. You know what's funny? He said, his voice a little stronger now. Mrs. Rodriguez always tells me the same thing. She says I play my best when I forget that anyone is listening. Your teacher sounds very wise, Dr. Wells said gently. Why don't you try that now? Tommy nodded. He thought about his tiny apartment, about sitting at his cheap keyboard in his bedroom with no one around but his mom in the next room. He thought about how the music made him feel when he played alone, how it created colors and shapes in his mind, how it told stories that he couldn't see but could somehow understand completely. He began again. This time it was different. His shoulders relaxed. His breathing steadied, and the music came out the way it was supposed to. He played through the entire Mozart piece without stopping, and when he finished, he could hear the difference in the room. The silence felt different, warmer somehow. That was beautiful, Tommy, Dr. Wells said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Now we'd like to try something a bit more challenging. Professor Anderson is going to play a short piece for you. We'd like you to listen carefully and then play back as much as you can remember. You won't be expected to play it perfectly. We just want to see how you process what you hear. Is that okay? Okay, Tommy said. He heard someone walk across the room and sit at another piano. Then the music started. It was a piece Tommy had never heard before. It was more complex than the Mozart, with runs of notes that went up and down the keyboard quickly, and chords that created tension and release. The melody was beautiful but sad. Tommy closed his eyes behind his dark glasses and listened. He let the music wash over him, tried to understand its shape, its emotion, its story. It lasted about 2 minutes. When it ended, the room was quiet again. That was a Chopin nocturne, Professor Anderson said. Take your time. Play whatever you remember. Tommy's heart was racing again, but this time it wasn't from nervousness. It was from excitement. This was the part he loved. The challenge. The puzzle. He had heard the piece once, but in his mind he could still hear echoes of it, like footprints in sand. He put his hands on the keys and started to play. It wasn't perfect. He knew that. There were sections where he couldn't remember the exact notes, so he improvised, trying to capture the feeling, if not the precise melody. There were moments where he hesitated, searching for the right chord. But he pushed through, trusting his instincts, letting his ears guide him. When he finished, he sat back, breathing hard. I'm sorry. I know I didn't get it all right. The room was completely silent. Tommy started to worry. Had he done badly? Had he disappointed them? Then he heard something unexpected. Someone was crying. Soft sniffles that someone was trying to hide. I apologize, an older man's voice said, thick with emotion. In my 35 years of teaching, I have never heard anything like that. You heard that piece once, Tommy? Once, and you just played back 70% of it, and the parts you didn't remember you filled in with such musical intelligence that it still made sense. Professor Mitchell is right, Dr. Wells said, and Tommy could hear the amazement in her voice. "Tommy, what you just did is extraordinary. Most trained musicians couldn't do what you just did." Tommy felt his face flush, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. "Really?" "Really," Robert said, and Tommy could hear the pride in his voice. "Tommy, these professors have seen thousands of students. They know talent when they hear it," Dr. Wells spoke again. "We'd like to hear one more piece if you're not too tired. Would you play something else, Anything you'd like," Tommy thought for a moment. Then he said, "Can I play something I made up myself?" There was a brief pause. "You compose?" Professor Anderson asked, sounding surprised. "I don't know if you'd call it composing," Tommy said. "Sometimes when I'm practicing, I just start playing things that aren't from any piece I've learned. My mom calls them my thinking songs because I play them when I'm thinking about stuff." "We would love to hear one of your thinking songs," Dr. Wells said warmly. Tommy positioned his hands on the keys. He thought about the past few weeks. The excitement, the fear, the hope. He thought about his mom and how hard she worked. He thought about Mrs. Rodriguez and how she believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. He thought about Robert and how one moment of kindness from a stranger had changed everything. And he played. The melody was simple but emotional. It started soft and uncertain, like a question being asked. Then it grew stronger, more confident. There were moments of darkness, heavy chords that spoke of struggle and doubt. But always the melody found its way back to light, to hope, to a kind of quiet joy. When he finished, Tommy sat very still, his hands resting in his lap. He had poured everything he felt into those keys, and now he felt empty in a good way, like he had given away something precious and knew it was in safe hands. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Dr. Wells broke the silence. Her voice was soft but firm. "Tommy, I think we've heard everything we need to hear. Would you and your mother mind waiting outside for just a few minutes while we discuss things?" Tommy nodded. Linda helped him up from the bench, and they walked out into the hallway. The door closed behind them with a soft click. "How do you think you did?" Linda asked, squeezing his hand. Tommy leaned his head against her shoulder. "I don't know, Mom. I played the best I could." "That's all anyone can ever ask," she said, kissing the top of his head. Inside the room, the conversation they couldn't hear was already reaching its conclusion. Tommy and his mother sat on a wooden bench in the hallway. 5 minutes felt like an hour. Linda kept glancing at the closed door, trying to read something, anything from the muffled voices inside. Tommy sat quietly, his cane resting against his knee, his fingers unconsciously moving as if still playing piano keys. "Whatever happens," Linda said softly, "I'm proud of you. You were so brave in there." "I made mistakes, though," Tommy said. "On the first try, I messed up really bad. But you didn't give up. That's what matters. You started again, and you were beautiful." The door opened. Robert stepped out first, his face unreadable. Tommy heard his mother stand up quickly, heard the hope and fear in the rustle of her clothes. "They want to speak with you both," Robert said, and Tommy still couldn't tell from his voice whether that was good news or bad news. They walked back into the room. Tommy's heart was beating so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. He felt his mother's hand trembling slightly in his. Dr. Wells spoke first. "Please sit down," they sat. Tommy gripped the edge of his chair. "Tommy," Dr. Wells began. "Linda, we've had a chance to discuss what we saw and heard today. I want to be completely transparent with you about our conversation." Tommy held his breath. What Tommy demonstrated today is, quite frankly, remarkable. His ability to learn by ear, his musical memory, his natural sense of phrasing and emotion. These are gifts that cannot be taught. They're simply part of who he is. Tommy felt a flutter of hope in his chest. "However," Dr. Wells continued, and Tommy's hope flickered, "we also have to be realistic. Tommy has only been playing for 6 months. The other students in our program have been playing for years. Many of them can read music, understand complex theory, and have technical skills that Tommy hasn't developed yet, simply because he hasn't had the time or resources." Linda's grip on Tommy's hand tightened. "I understand," she said quietly. "Thank you for giving him the chance to audition. Please let me finish," Dr. Wells said gently. "What I'm trying to say is that this isn't a traditional situation. We can't simply place Tommy in our standard program because he would be starting from a different place than other students. He needs something more specialized, more individualized." The room was silent for a moment, which is why Dr. Wells continued, and Tommy heard the smile enter her voice. We've decided to offer Tommy a full scholarship, but with a special arrangement. Mr. Chen has agreed to take Tommy on as a private student. Tommy would work with him one-on-one 3 times a week and also attend some of our group classes for music theory and history. We would provide him with access to our practice rooms and instruments whenever he needs them. Tommy's mouth fell open. Linda made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Are you serious?" Linda asked, her voice shaking. "Completely serious," Professor Anderson said. "Mrs. Wells is being modest, but I'll be blunt. What your son has is something we see maybe once in a decade, maybe less. We would be foolish not to nurture that gift." Tommy found his voice. "Mr. Chen, you want to teach me? But I thought you were retiring." Robert's laugh was warm. I am. "But Tommy, you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Music isn't just about performing. It's about passing something forward. And I think I have more to teach than I realized." "There's just one thing," Professor Mitchell added. His was the voice of the older man who had cried during the audition. "This is going to be hard work, Tommy. Harder than anything you've done before. Are you prepared for that?" Tommy didn't hesitate. Yes, I am." "Then welcome to the New England Conservatory," Dr. Wells said. Linda burst into tears. She pulled Tommy into a hug so tight he could barely breathe, but he didn't care. He was laughing and crying at the same time, unable to believe this was really happening. The next few months moved faster than Tommy could have imagined. 3 times a week, Linda took him to the conservatory. Robert was patient but demanding. He pushed Tommy in ways Mrs. Rodriguez never had, not because she wasn't a good teacher, but because Robert was preparing Tommy for something bigger. "Your natural gifts will only take you so far," Robert explained during one of their early lessons. "Now we need to build technique. Your fingers need to learn how to move independently. Your wrists need to stay relaxed. Your posture matters more than you think." Some days were frustrating. Tommy would practice the same scale hundreds of times until his fingers ached. He would play exercises that weren't songs at all, just patterns of notes designed to build strength and flexibility. "This is boring," Tommy complained one afternoon after running through finger exercises for the 20th time. "I know," Robert said, "but think of it like building a house. The foundation isn't pretty, but without it, everything falls apart. We're building your foundation." But there were magical days too, days when Robert would play pieces by the great composers and then talk about their lives, helping Tommy understand the emotions and stories behind the music. Days when Tommy would sight read, or rather ear read, a new piece and suddenly understand something he hadn't grasped before. Mrs. Rodriguez came to visit during the 3rd month. Robert had insisted on meeting her, to thank her for being Tommy's first teacher. "You gave him something I can't teach," Robert told her as they sat in one of the practice rooms. "You taught him to love music. That's the hardest thing to teach and the most important." Mrs. Rodriguez wiped her eyes. "I just gave him a chance. He did the rest." "We both know that's not true," Robert said kindly. "You saw something in him and nurtured it. You're the reason he's here." One evening, about 4 months into his training, Robert asked Tommy to stay after their lesson. "I want to talk to you about something," Robert said. "There's a recital coming up in 2 months. Students from the conservatory will perform for friends, family, and some members of the community. I think you should be part of it." Tommy's stomach flipped. "Perform? In front of people? Like a lot of people?" "About 200 people," Robert said. "I know it sounds scary." "It sounds terrifying," Tommy corrected. "Here's the thing, Tommy. You can be the most talented musician in the world, but if you can't share that talent with others, what's the point? Music is meant to be heard. It's meant to connect people. You're ready for this. What if I mess up? What if I freeze like I did at the audition? Then you'll start again, just like you did at the audition." "Tommy, do you remember what happened after you started again?" Tommy nodded slowly. "I played the best I'd ever played." "Exactly. The fear didn't destroy you. It made you dig deeper. And every time you perform, you'll get a little more comfortable. But you have to start somewhere." Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "What would I play?" Robert smiled. "I was hoping you'd ask that. I think you should play 3 pieces. Something classical, something romantic, and something of your own." "My own music?" Tommy asked, surprised. "Those thinking songs you mentioned at your audition. Tommy, you have a gift for composition too. I've heard you improvising during practice. You create beautiful melodies without even trying. I think people should hear that." Over the next 2 months, Tommy practiced like never before. He would arrive at the conservatory early and stay late. He practiced until his fingers hurt, then took a break, then practiced some more. Linda worried he was pushing himself too hard, but Robert assured her this was normal. He's not practicing because he has to, Robert explained. He's practicing because he wants to. There's a big difference. The piece Tommy struggled with most was his own composition. He had dozens of melodies floating in his head, but turning them into a complete piece was harder than he expected. It needs structure, Robert explained. A beginning, a middle, and end. Think of it like telling a story. What do you want people to feel? Tommy thought about it. I want them to feel what I felt. When you first heard me play, when I got accepted here, when I realized my life was changing, then that's your story. Hope, transformation, new beginnings. Tommy worked on the piece every day. He would play a section, change it, play it again. Slowly, gradually, the composition took shape. It started with a single note repeated softly like a heartbeat. Then other notes joined in, building into a melody that was both sad and hopeful. The middle section grew more complex, with runs of notes that represented the challenges and the work. And then the ending brought everything together into a triumphant resolution that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. That's the one, Robert said when Tommy played it through completely for the first time. That's your piece. They decided to call it Awakening. The week before the recital, Tommy barely slept. He ran through the pieces in his mind constantly. He dreamed about playing, about the audience, about everything going wrong. The night before the performance, Robert called him. How are you feeling? Robert asked. Scared, Tommy admitted. Really, really scared. Good, Robert said, which wasn't the answer Tommy expected. Being scared means you care. It means this matters to you. Just remember, tomorrow night isn't about being perfect. It's about sharing something beautiful with people. You've worked hard. You're prepared. Now you just need to trust yourself. What if I let you down? Robert's voice was firm but kind. Tommy, you could walk onto that stage tomorrow and not play a single note, and you still wouldn't let me down. You've already exceeded every expectation. Tomorrow is just the beginning of your journey. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. After they hung up, Tommy sat at his keyboard at home. He played through Awakening one more time softly so he wouldn't wake his mother. As his fingers moved across the keys, he thought about how much had changed in just a few months. How a chance encounter in a concert hall lobby had opened up a whole new world. He thought about Dr. Wells and the professors who had believed in him. He thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, who had started it all. He thought about his mother, who had sacrificed so much to give him opportunities. And he thought about Robert, who had seen something in a nervous 12-year-old boy and decided to take a chance. Tomorrow, he would walk onto that stage. Tomorrow, he would share his music with hundreds of people. Tomorrow, everything might change again. But tonight, he was just Tommy, a boy who loved piano, a boy who had been given a gift and was learning how to use it. He finished playing and sat in the darkness of his room, his hands resting in his lap, feeling ready. The day of the recital arrived with bright sunshine streaming through Tommy's bedroom window. He woke up early, his stomach already twisted in knots. He could hear his mother in the kitchen making breakfast, humming softly to herself. She always hummed when she was nervous but trying to hide it. "Morning, sweetheart," Linda said when Tommy walked into the kitchen. "I made your favorite, pancakes with blueberries." Tommy sat down at the table, but he could barely eat. Every bite felt like it was sticking in his throat. "You need to eat something," Linda said gently. "It's going to be a long day." "I'm too nervous," Tommy admitted. Linda sat down across from him. "Do you remember when you were 6 years old right after you lost your sight? You were so scared to leave the apartment. You didn't want to use the cane, didn't want anyone to see you struggling." Tommy nodded. He remembered those days. The anger, the frustration, the fear. "And I told you that being scared is okay. That brave people aren't the ones who feel no fear. They're the ones who feel the fear and do it anyway. Today you're being brave." Tommy managed a small smile. "I'll try to eat." The hours before the recital crawled by. Tommy practiced one more time in his room, running through the pieces, making sure his fingers remembered every note. Linda fussed with his clothes, making sure his shirt was pressed and his tie was straight. Neither of them talked much. The weight of what was about to happen hung heavy in the air. At 4 o'clock they arrived at the conservatory. The recital hall was bigger than Tommy had imagined. He could tell by the way sound moved through the space, by the echo of footsteps, by the voices that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Robert found them backstage. How are we doing? I might throw up, Tommy said honestly. Robert laughed. I've thrown up before performances more times than I can count. It's practically a tradition. Come on, let me show you the piano you'll be playing. He led Tommy onto the empty stage. Tommy could feel the vastness of the hall in front of him, all those empty seats that would soon be filled with people. His hands were shaking as Robert guided them to the piano. This is a Steinway Grand, Robert said. One of the finest pianos in the building. I've arranged for you to use it tonight. Go ahead, try it out. Tommy sat down and touched the keys. They were perfectly balanced, smooth, and responsive. He played a few notes, then a scale. The sound filled the empty hall, rich and full. It's beautiful, Tommy whispered. It is. Robert agreed. Tommy, listen to me. In about 2 hours, this hall is going to be full of people. Your mother will be in the front row. Mrs. Rodriguez is coming. Some of the professors from your audition will be here. There will be students, parents, music lovers from the community. Tommy's hands started shaking harder. But here's what I want you to remember. When you sit down at this piano tonight, all of those people will disappear. It will just be you and the music. That's all that matters. Not the crowd, not the expectations, not the fear. Just you and the music. What if I forget everything? Tommy asked, his voice small. Then you'll remember it again. Tommy, you know these pieces inside and out. Your fingers know them. Your heart knows them. Trust yourself. The next hour and a half was a blur. Other students arrived, all of them nervous, all of them doing last-minute practice runs. Tommy sat in a quiet corner backstage, listening to the sounds of the hall filling up. Voices, laughter, the rustle of programs, the scraping of chairs. Linda came backstage to see him one more time before it started. Mrs. Rodriguez is here, she said. And Tommy, there are so many people. The hall is almost full. Tommy felt his heart racing even faster. You're going to be amazing, Linda said, kissing his forehead. I love you so much. A student coordinator came around, telling everyone the order of performances. Tommy would be performing fifth, right in the middle of the program. He didn't know if that was good or bad. Part of him wanted to go first and get it over with. Part of him was grateful for the extra time to calm down. The recital began. Tommy sat backstage listening to the other students perform. Some were good, some were excellent. Each performance was met with warm applause. When the fourth student finished, the coordinator touched Tommy's shoulder. You're next. Ready? Tommy stood up, his legs shaky. He picked up his cane and followed the coordinator to the side of the stage. He could hear Dr. Wells at the microphone introducing him. Our next performer is a very special young musician. Just 6 months ago, he played piano for the very first time. Tonight, he'll be playing 3 pieces for us. Please welcome Tommy Chen. Tommy realized with a start that she had called him Tommy Chen. Robert had quietly arranged for him to use his last name. The gesture made Tommy's eyes sting with tears. He walked onto the stage, guided by the coordinator. The applause was welcoming, encouraging. He found the piano bench and sat down, adjusting his position. The hall fell silent. 200 people were watching him, waiting. Tommy placed his hands on the keys and froze. His mind went blank. He couldn't remember how the first piece started. Panic shot through him like electricity. This was his worst nightmare coming true. Then from somewhere in the front row he heard it. His mother's voice, so quiet that maybe only he could hear it, humming. She was humming the opening bars of his first piece, the melody he had practiced 1,000 times. And just like that, he remembered. He began to play. The opening piece was a Bach prelude, simple but elegant. His fingers found the notes, and slowly, the fear began to fade. Robert was right. The audience disappeared. It was just him and the piano and the music flowing through him. When he finished the Bach, the applause startled him. He had been so lost in the music that he'd almost forgotten where he was. He took a breath and moved into the second piece, a Chopin waltz. This one was more challenging, with runs of notes that required precision and grace. But his hands knew what to do. All those hours of practice, all those repetitions, had built something solid in his muscle memory. The Chopin earned even louder applause. Tommy could hear someone whistle, and despite his nervousness, he smiled. Now came the hard part. His own composition. Awakening. He paused before starting, gathering his thoughts. This piece was different from the others. It wasn't just about playing notes. It was about telling his story, about sharing something deeply personal. He played the opening note, soft and tentative. Then another. And another. The melody built slowly, Like sunrise spreading across the sky. He poured everything into it. Every fear he had overcome. Every moment of doubt. Every breakthrough and victory. The middle section grew intense, his fingers flying across the keys representing the struggle and the work. And then the resolution. The triumphant ending that spoke of hope and new beginnings. When he played the final chord and lifted his hands from the keys, the hall was silent. For a terrible moment, Tommy thought he had done something wrong, that maybe people hadn't liked it. Then the applause started, but it wasn't like the polite applause from before. This was different. People were standing. He could hear the sound of chairs scraping as more and more people rose to their feet. The applause grew louder, accompanied by cheers and whistles. Tommy stood up, unsure of what to do. He felt tears streaming down his face. He had done it. He had actually done it. Robert came onto the stage and pulled Tommy into a hug. "That was perfect," he said, his own voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." After the recital, people crowded around Tommy. Students congratulated him. Parents told him how moved they were. One woman told him that his final piece had made her cry. Several asked if he planned to record his music. But the moment that meant the most came when Mrs. Rodriguez found him. She didn't say anything at first. She just hugged him tight. "You did it, Tommy," she finally said. "You took that first step I showed you, and look where you went with it." "I couldn't have done any of it without you," Tommy said. "You were the one who believed in me first. I just opened the door," she said. "You're the one who walked through it." Later that night, after they had gotten home and Tommy had changed into his pajamas, he sat at his old keyboard one more time. The same $30 keyboard that had started everything. It still stuck in places. It still didn't sound like a real piano, but it was his and he loved it. Linda came and sat beside him. "How do you feel?" Tommy thought about it. "Different," he said finally. "Like something changed tonight. Not just with the performance, but inside me." "You overcame your fear," Linda said. "That changes a person." "No," Tommy said slowly, working out his thoughts. "I didn't overcome my fear. I was scared the whole time right up until I finished playing. But I did it anyway. I guess that's what being brave really means." Linda put her arm around him. "When did you get so wise?" Tommy laughed. "I have a good teacher. Several of them, actually." They sat there together in the quiet apartment and Tommy played softly, one of his thinking songs. This one was peaceful and content. It spoke of gratitude, of family, of unexpected gifts and second chances. He thought about that night in the concert hall lobby just a few months ago. He had been so nervous to play for Robert, so sure he would mess up or disappoint. If someone had told him then that he would end up here, playing recitals and studying with one of the world's greatest pianists, he never would have believed it. But life was strange that way. One moment, one person, one act of kindness could change everything. Robert had told him to play just for fun, and in doing that, Tommy had found not just fun but purpose. Not just music but a voice. Not just a hobby but a future. As he played the last notes of his thinking song and the sound faded into silence, Tommy knew this was just the beginning. There would be more performances, more challenges, more moments of doubt and triumph. But he was ready for all of it, because he had learned the most important lesson of all, that the greatest music doesn't come from perfect technique or flawless execution. It comes from the courage to share your heart with the world one note at a time. And that was something Tommy could do. Today, tomorrow, and for all the days to come.